Rolling.
What do you got? Just my face?
I got your face in the mural.
But it's close up?
It's a close up on your face and then the whole mural to the right.
Can you take a picture real quick? I just want to see.
Okay. It's the same as that photo kind of.
Yeah, it just looks so...
I changed lenses.
No, it should be way closer.
Way closer? But do you want... You're going to have a reveal of the mural?
Yes.
Besides this? Okay.
Yes. I want this to be right in my fucking...
Okay, cool.
I almost want to stare at the camera.
I'm rolling.
Rolling.
Well, they can take our bones and bury them deep under the river, but we'll still be together and we cannot be defeated. They can take our trombones and pack them down there with us, but no matter how long it takes us, we will not be defeated.
When we dance together under the moon and under the weather, we will lock our eyes forever in the night.
Hello and welcome to the Indie Film Academy. I'm your host, Jason Buff. Thanks for joining us here today. On this episode, I'm talking with Jeremy Gardner and Christian Stell about their films The Battery and Tex Montana Will Survive. We'll talk about all the stuff that went into making The Battery, the difficulties of making a really, really low-budget independent film, the cold, hard reality of being an indie filmmaker today, as well as the new way they've approached distribution for their newest feature. So get comfortable. You might want a nice cold beverage or some tea. You know, maybe some aroma in the room, maybe some lavender, some Drakkar Noir, and enjoy this episode, because I had a good time talking with these guys. Here we go.
We dance together under the moon and under the weather. We will shake our arms forever and a night.
Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast, where it's all about learning how to make and market your independent film online. And now your host, Jason Buff.
What I think is when my true fans, my name is Tex Montana. I'm going to spend 30 whole days out in the wild, completely alone. I'm cozy. I'm sheltered from the elements. I've got walls on. Oh, there's a fucking something's in here. Something's in here. Because you got to get through the skull. The skull of the baby bear is real tough. I feel like I'm on Jupiter right now. I always try to travel with fire if you got it going. That way, you can move it from place to place. I am well and truly lost. I'm lost. How dare you watch this television show? You get up and you come out here and you get me. Yeah! My show is one big lie. You know, people always talk about the will to survive, the human will to survive. And I am starting to wonder if I have that.
You guys ever heard the show?
Yeah, I've listened to a few episodes. Yeah, I've been subscribed for a while, but then I went on a tangent and subscribed to every podcast ever, and now I can't ever remember what I'm supposed to listen to.
No, I used to, like, my favorite way to learn filmmaking, aside from DVD commentaries, was listening to podcasts, you know, because you can sit there for a good hour and a half listening to a filmmaker, and you never get that access on just, like, interviews and stuff.
That's literally how, yeah, that was one of my big tools when I was deciding I wanted to make The Battery was podcasts.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I started back with creative screenwriting, Jeff Goldsmith's podcast.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I listened to a ton of those, and then I just went, what else is there? And I started downloading everything.
What other ones did you listen to? My big one, because I was trying to make a film in 2012 that didn't end up happening, but I would listen to one called Film Method all the time. And it was two women that were like, they had already made their own film and they were just interviewing people that had worked on it and talked about it, but they stopped recording it in 2012. So it was like, all of a sudden just came to an end. But
just
it was
a void now.
Well, that's kind of what I based mine off of, was just the idea that I want to learn stuff and people want to, they want to hear what actually goes into filmmaking, instead of like these kind of generic conversations. I like to go into, the nuts and bolts, money issues, technical, the cameras that were used and stuff like that. So
no, absolutely. I mean, that's the important stuff. And that's why I watched every behind the scenes extra on every DVD I had for 10 years. And I listened to director's notes for a long time. I don't know if you know that podcast. That was fun. There was another one.
I'm like a big YouTube and Vimeo guy. Like I watch a lot of the camera geeks on there, and all those camera reviews and tests. Like I love Philip Bloom.
Yeah.
Bloom is like my hero.
Yeah, he's there's a lot. I think most of the stuff, because I also do. I'm an amateur cinematographer, so I just sit there and watch everything about lighting tutorials and everything about lenses and whatever, And I don't think it's like you don't even need to go to school anymore if you've got an internet connection.
No, absolutely
get on,
not. Everything that I did technically for the battery and now Tex Montana has been through tutorials. It's insane. Like I was just telling Jeremy the other day, I was like, well, I'm trying to fix a couple shots in Tex Montana color wise. So I'm like, it's time to watch another 20-hour DaVinci Resolve tutorial.
Yeah, I spent most of my time listening to screenwriter interviews and stuff too, because back when I didn't think I could actually make a movie, I just wanted to be able to write a script. And just to hear different processes is amazing, because no one does it the same way. And so you'll start to think that your writing routine is weird, and then you'll listen to 20 different people say that theirs is 20 different variations on some same thing. So it doesn't matter. It's just putting the work in.
I mean, that's one of the things that I just recently put up a blog post about the creative process. And there's a bunch of videos, about screenwriters only talking about the creative end, and how they schedule out their day and how they actually write, and it was nice to hear almost all of them say, well, I spend most of the morning procrastinating. Mm-hmm. And then when I start hating myself, I'll kind of sit down and I'll start writing, So you realize that everybody that has this drive to write screenplays or to write anything, they're all kind of fighting with themselves,
Yeah, I mean, it's a daily grind. But the thing that I've taken away from every single interview I've heard is that the successful writers are the ones who treat it like a day job. They know that they are going to put in a certain amount of hours every day in the seat, and just writing. And boy, just getting your butt in the seat is the hardest part for me, because I will find everything else to do.
When you started screenwriting, what were the resources that you found were the most helpful?
It's funny. I started probably very similar to a lot of people. I found a Sid Field, screenplay book from God knows when. It was all yellowed and old for like 25 cents in a used bookstore. And, people kind of laugh off those manuals, but that really helped me understand the structure and the formatting. And then once you get that down, it's just about reading other screenplays. I just read as many screenplays as I could, and you start to see how you go, oh, okay, well, this is the structure, but I can tweak it to make it you read a certain way that I want to read. And I like to write mine with absolutely zero camera interaction at all. I really like almost to write it like a prose story where it just flows.
Yeah, they say Jeremy's screenplays sometimes read like novels. It's kind of
it's sparse, good. But sparse novel. They're not like dense. I have a rule. I refuse to have any action beat go over 4 sentences. I will not do it because I know people skim. So I have little rules for myself, and I don't like to break up sequences with like interiors and exteriors. I kind of like to try to let them flow into each other and just drop maybe while he walks into, and then the next line, the bathroom. There's no like interior, the bathroom, because you want to just keep a pace and a kind of momentum going. I'm really about readability, because it's so hard for me to read some screenplays. They're just so dense and just so much stuff on the page.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think that you have to follow very strict codes, and what I've learned from talking to other screenwriters is that, as long as you're telling the story and as long as you're bringing people into the movie, that you can kind of do whatever you want to. You have to have a certain amount of structure, but there's a lot of leeway with that.
No, there really is. There's no, like I said, that's what I like about John August and Craig Mazin. They'll talk to you about the nuts and bolts on their podcast all the time, but for the most part, every rule that someone tells you that you can't break, they will just say, no, that's not true. If that were the case, we wouldn't have this movie or that movie or this movie or whatever. So you can break whatever rule you want if you're writing a good story.
So what would your typical day be, talking about screenwriting? Like, do you have to set like a date that you're going to finish by, or do you just sit down? Do you do a bunch of writing out notes and blueprints? What kind of is the process?
I'm so weird when it comes to writing. Unfortunately, I have not had to write on a deadline yet. I have not, taken a job where it needs to be in by this time. So it's very hard for me to manufacture my own deadlines. So typically I will just start writing. And then I'll do what's like a beat sheet where I will write down just slug lines of the scenes that I know are going to happen up until a point where I don't know anymore. And then I'll go and I'll start writing that. And then I was telling someone the other day, I think I was telling your wife, Christian, that if you look through my notebooks, you will see the same beat sheet written over and over and over again. And I don't know why I do it. I will go back after writing like 10 or 15 pages and I will write again the same beat sheet of the scenes, and I'll maybe add a little bit in between, or I'll reorganize them. But for the most part, I think it's just me refamiliarizing myself with where I'm at, and then hopefully something will spring up and I'll add another beat to the end of that thing. And then I'll go back and start writing again. And I'll take walks and lots of showers and just, I ruminate on it a lot. I think you get a lot more writing done when you're not writing than you actually think you are.
Lots of Starbucks trips.
Oh yeah. I have a weird thing about being able to write in the place I live. There's something about being there as often as I am where it's just like, I can't disconnect myself from just the routine of living in the home. So I need to try to get out of it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people have told me that. I mean, I'm the same way too. I cannot, I'm here in my office right now. I've tried to write here and it just doesn't happen, so I'll go off to Starbucks and I'll sit there. And when you don't have all the distraction, that's when you say, okay, I can sit here and actually do the hard part, which is,
the work.
Focusing on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something about the chatter of being in a public place. I like that kind of white noise of people talking and just the mumbling and the ruckus of just people moving around. That helps too, other than the silence. Another problem I have with writing, which people should not do, is I wake up every day when I sit down to write and I go back and tinker with everything I've already written. So I will kill an hour or 2 hours just perfecting what's already written. So, in a good way, when the script is finally done, it's been polished in a way that it's like it's a second or third draft, but it takes so long to get to that final draft because I just go back and move commas, and moving commas is not writing.
Do you do one as they say, vomit draft? Do you try to get one first draft down and then go back and start rewriting?
No, that's what I wish I could do. I really wish I could just barrel ahead and not worry about what happened before, but I cannot. I will keep going back and tinkering and tweaking. And then hopefully by the time, if I wake up and I tinker with the pages I wrote the day before, hopefully by the time I get to the end of those, I've kind of pushed myself into the process a little bit.
So how did you guys meet? You guys have been friends for a while, right? And where are you from?
We're both from Central Florida. We're right outside Disney World, but we met when we were kids, basically. I mean, I was definitely a kid. I was 13 or something. Mm-hmm. We started making movies back then, and that was kind of our film school, it was also our regular school because we dropped out of school.
Florida education system.
Yeah. So I mean, that's like staying in school in Florida. But yeah, we just started making movies back then, with a $500 Sony Handycam. And
what year are we talking here? Just so I know the technology.
Let me think about this.
We shot The Bags in 2000.
Okay. So this is pre-HD.
Yes, definitely. Okay. It was almost pre-computer editing. I still remember buying a hard drive for $500 for a 40 gigabyte hard drive.
I mean, weren't we cutting our shorts before we did The Bags on VHS to VCR to VCR?
We were editing VCR to VCR when in 1996 or 7 or something. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we just did that. We made some features with my sister, and got into some film festivals, and then we became adults and we had to get jobs.
That was the most,
yeah.
Bummer.
So then it was like an entire decade where we just, waited tables and so on.
Yeah, we didn't do much for 10 years, and then we kind of moved apart. And then I was I'm going to go pound the pavement as an actor. And then that got really demoralizing really quickly. And I had spent a lot of time, like we were talking about, watching those DVD extras and reading those interviews and listening to those podcasts and thinking, you know what? I think it's about time to get the band back together. The technology had finally caught up, and I started to believe that there was a way to make a movie that could stand, against real, quote unquote, real movies now. Mm-hmm. So I felt like we should jump back in it, because that was the thing about our early movies, even though they were fun and, we played festival. I remember the director of the Sarasota Film Festival telling us, I'm going to put your movie in this festival, but because it's clear that you guys made a real movie, but it's also very clear that you have absolutely no money, because it's just the quality was so.
Well, he said it was the first movie they had ever played that wasn't shot on film.
Mm-hmm.
So It was crazy.
I mean, he was even talking about like maybe having a micro budget features section in following, festivals, because he just didn't know what to do with ours. But by the time the technology caught up, was like, okay, well, we can make something that you could literally play in a theater and people wouldn't be like, ew, what was this shot on? My face?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely know that feeling, because, I mean, I think I'm a little older than you guys, but, when I was in film school, it was like, that was the only option. We could shoot on 16 millimeter and like spend everything we had, and like spend it was easy to spend like $30,000 on a little crappy 16 millimeter film, because you had to send it off to the lab, or the other option was to shoot on VHS. So there's a lot of people, now that are coming back to it after it's like everybody realized, okay, now the technology's caught up. All these people that couldn't make films when they were, college age are coming back to it,
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a, it's such a democratic process now. It was like the art that no one was allowed to get in unless you had permission or money, and now that's not the case.
Right. Okay, so you went where did you go? You went to New York area, or where were you at?
Yeah, actually, Christian's dad got a show on the Food Network and moved up to New England, Connecticut area to shoot the show, and he was like, he's like a second father to me. So he's like, hey, I know you want to be an actor. We're going to go live like 40 minutes away from New York City if you want to come live with us. So I hugged my family goodbye and moved up there for 12 years.
I mean, he moved up there with me, and then within like 6 months of me living up there, I was like, I want to move back to Florida. And then left him with my parents.
And then their entire family ended up moving back to Florida, and I stayed. I was there just until this last October. But I can't. I got to get out of Florida. I can't take it.
So you were like what, on the couch or something for up in there in the?
Oh no, they had a room for me. They had. I mean, it was like I was their third child. So it was a great living situation. And then I ended up, I got a job and I got my own place and I moved in with a girl and I settled in up there when they all left. I need seasons. I was just talking about how I can't deal with this warm winter down here. It's creeping me out. I'm a very seasonally, creative person. If it's nice out all the time, all I want to do is do fun stuff. I kind of need those dark, cold winter months to get a little, to turn my thoughts inward and helps to create and read and focus.
Right. Maybe snow every once in a while.
Oh, it's so nice.
I just want to be able to drive to the store without like driving my car off a sheet of ice. So, I mean, that just flipped me out. I stopped driving for like 4 years when I lived up there because I only lived up there for 2 years, but I just refused to drive on the snow. And then I got scared of driving in general because I was like, I haven't driven in 4 months.
All right. So let's focus on filmmaking. When was what was the kind of seed that got you guys started with The Battery? Where did that kind of begin?
Well, there was this online kind of, there was a site called Massify that was going to make a movie completely through the community. So they were taking pitches for scripts and then they were taking director videos and then they were casting all through this website. So I sent I made an audition video and I wanted to make it kind of like a short film so it stood out. So I made this little 2-minute short about a guy and his friend who kind of document their day-to-day life in a zombie apocalypse world. This little 2-minute nothing video. And nothing ever came of that site or that movie. I believe it became Perkins 14, one of the 8 films to die for in that series or whatever it was. But I couldn't shake the idea of this, like, just 2 guys wandering around in the woods, in a post-apocalyptic situation. And so then I started thinking about, well, if you're going to make a no-budget movie, the way you should do it is you should tailor it to what you have. And in my mind, that's not lacking in story. You could write a creative story around any situation. So I figured, if we have no money, what's a way to do that? Well, okay, we'll just shoot it in the woods, right? And then if there are people trying to avoid zombies, well, if they're smart, they're going to avoid cities, so they'll be in the woods, and that way we could get around all that stuff. And it just kind of became a way for me to take the zombie genre and turn it inward and focus on how 2 different minds would be affected by that, rather than do this big grand, macro scale, the whole world is dying.
Yeah, and at the same time that, like, he's thinking about getting back into film, I had become a food photographer.
Okay.
And the best food photography camera was the 5D. So I had a 5D Mark II. So I already had the camera that was like changing the indie filmmaking world. I just so happened to have that for my job. So it was like the kind of perfect storm. As he was thinking about this movie, I had the equipment to make a movie, sort of. Mm-hmm. I had the camera at least.
Yeah, okay. So that's basically where it started. Just tailoring a story to what I knew would be cheap. There was a long time where I could not convince anybody that you could make a movie for the kind of money I was talking about. I just couldn't. I remember I was introduced to some like rich guy at a bar, and he started talking to me like a bigwig. And as soon as I mentioned $6,000, he just laughed and walked away. So that was
that happens a lot.
Well, it doesn't happen as much anymore. It's people are coming around to the fact that movies can be made for nothing.
Well, the funny thing that I run into is so many people think that they need $100,000 or $200,000 to make a little indie movie.
It's crazy.
It's ridiculous.
It frustrates me to no end. I've seen so many people just waste money. They just waste money. And I don't understand, like my whole concept going into this was, look, I believe we can do this, but if we can't, if it doesn't work, and I got the money from like 10 different people, so it would be like little chunks of $600. So nobody was going to be broke. No one was going to lose their house, and no one was going to hate me. It's just hedge your bets. Write something that you believe in that you could do for an incredibly small amount, and then don't break anybody. Don't lose any friends over it.
Had you been acting before?
Yeah, I'd always been like more of a writer and an actor. I did a bunch of plays when I went up there, up to the north, and I was always the actor in our movies when we were making them younger. I was in all the plays in high school, so I wanted to be an actor or a writer. And it wasn't until I got the confidence from listening to all these interviews with other filmmakers and watching movies and starting to understand them more that I was like, well, I'm just going to direct this thing. I'm just going to do this thing straight through. It's going to be my little creature. But it took a long time for me to say I'm directing this because I had never been in those shoes before.
Sorry, Christian, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say the other thing about budgets is that, I think it's a hard thing for people to wrap their head around that equipment can be rented, and like, in fact, it always is rented in large budgets even. So like that was one of the things that people come up and they're like, like you guys couldn't have made that movie for $6,000. It's like, it costs more for the equipment. And I'm like, I mean, I used a Zeiss lens, but it was $150 to rent it for the whole shoot. Mm-hmm. So there's always, I said the only thing I owned was the camera, and even that would have been $250 to rent.
Right.
So, I think that even that seems to be a barrier of entry for people, but it shouldn't be. It's not.
Yeah, it's funny because I've shot a couple of shorts down here. My cameras, I've only got a 60D, and I've got a couple of friends I've got one friend who has a 5D Mark III. and has never used it. Like it was a gift from her husband.
Oh,
and so I'm just like, hey, do you mind if we borrow your camera for this shoot and, whatever? And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't care. I don't even know how to turn it on. So it's just like the equipment now there's no barrier, in terms of equipment.
I'm shooting on a Canon C100 now, and I let my friend borrow it all the time, and he's another filmmaker. Yet, meanwhile, he went and shot a feature on an iPhone. And I was like, why didn't you just borrow my camera? And he's like, I was afraid to ask. So now he borrows it all the time.
Yeah.
Now that he knows.
Yeah. I think people also, one of the hardest things for me to do is ask for favors. I'm really bad at asking for favors, but you'd be amazed the amount of things that you can get just asking. Even just, a couple of weeks ago, we were shooting something new to add into Tex Montana. And we had put a budget aside for, okay, if these people want money, here's what we're willing to spend. And then we go there and then we introduce ourselves. We tell them what we're doing, and then they just let us do it for free. And it's amazing, how often you can find, the things that you need just through people's generosity. Everyone just balloons up in their mind what these budgets have to be, and they really don't have to be that big, especially for your first one.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you guys talk a little bit about the filmmaking process? I know you've talked a lot about the making of The Battery, but can you just talk, for indie filmmakers, can you talk about the process that you went through to create that, maybe a little bit of pre-production and the production process?
Well, yeah. I'll tell you.
I was like, are we allowed to curse?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was a bit of a shit show.
But it was a lot of a shit show. Well, that's the one thing that should be very much noted is that we, for the longest time, because Christian was down in Florida and I was up in Connecticut, kind of on my own, trying to get this thing going. And I'm not a producer. Like I said, I'm very bad at asking for things from people. And I finally had to set an arbitrary date. I said, August 1st, we're doing this thing. That's it. August 1st is the date. And I got locations squared away, but, between casting zombies and getting all the props together and trying to work out a schedule, which I'd never worked out a movie schedule before, these things were just beyond my grasp a little bit. And so that really, really hurt us in the actual production was that we had about 3 full days of pre-production. Once Christian got up there, we had 3 days to buy all the props, get all the zombies in order, get the crew, our small crew
shot lists.
Yeah, shot lists up to where we were shooting. So if there's anything to be learned is plan as much as you can before you get to set, because everything will go wrong when you get to set. And if you plan for the things that you can fix, then when everything else goes to shit, you'll be ahead of the game.
Meanwhile, I'd only ever shot 2 silent 4-minute short films before I got up there. I was still reading how to use the camera when I got up there, because I was like, I know how to do photography, but I did not know cinematography at all.
Well, I saw the clip of, I haven't seen the full documentary behind the scenes, but I saw you were looking at that book.
Master
Shots. And I thought that was kind of a joke, but were you actually?
Not a joke
100%.
at all. And those books are awesome. The Master Shots books.
Yeah.
Great.
But that's the thing too, is you have to there has to be kind of a blind, youthful confidence when you go into something like this, because if you think about all the ways in which you can fail, you just won't do it. And it's I know Christian is talented in a way that I'm not. I know he's going to solve any technical problem that we run into. And I have faith in my acting and my writing and understanding of what I want the story to look like. And it's just at some point you're going to run into stuff you don't really know, but as long as you keep it to a manageable budget, like I said, if you screw up, whatever, you know what? No one's going to die. So you just have to have this kind of blind confidence and just go in and do it. I think is learn as much as you can from all the free information that's out there, and then just do it, because man, if you really think about all the ways you could screw it up, you might as well just wait tables.
Yeah. And no one's come back and called me on the shots that are out of focus or the shots that are overexposed and all this other stuff that I can see and that pain me. Nobody calls you on that as long as the movie is a good story and is competent most of the time, you know, like as long as you're telling the story and it looks competent, you can get away with a little bit of that, at least at first. I mean, at least especially if you're making it yourself.
And I think passionately told too is a big thing too. It's like you can tell when you're watching something if it's somebody just trying to cash in, trying to grab a quick buck, somebody just doing an homage to some splatter thing that they've seen, or if someone just really genuinely is putting themselves out there. And I will give anything a pass if I can see the passion in it.
Now, was there a lot of ad lib on the set?
You know, it's funny. I get that a lot. And the script is, so when we cast Adam. Adam was the theatrically trained actor. So it was a little bit harder to get him to come out of his shell. So basically what you see in every scene is almost completely as scripted. But then I, as the director being in the scene, would let the scenes run longer. And I would start trying to throw him off at the end. So most of the ad libs will come from tags at the end of the scenes as written. Because once I would know in my mind that we were reaching the end of the scripted portion that Adam knew, I would kind of throw in a curveball and see if he would follow me. So there are definitely some ad libs in there and some goofy kind of asides. But for the most part, that is a written movie. I'm just so natural you can't even tell.
Yeah, I know. It's mind blowing.
No, all the little weird things like, fuck you, sir, fuck you to death at the end, the scene that's a tag. There's a scene where we're playing catch and I just do a weird dancing like boo doo boo doo boo boo. That was a whole dialogue scene. About like, we'll start our own like place and we'll let people in there and we'll decide who gets to, and it just was coming off really stilted because we were playing catch. And so I just said, screw it, I'm just going to do a weird song and dance. And then that was what we used instead.
One of the things that I think sinks films and one of the things that you guys do really well is it feels very natural. And one of the problems that I have with a lot of the things that are coming out now is the acting just, that's like the first thing you notice is just people reading lines. You don't really feel like a scene is actually taking place.
Well, I mean, it obviously all starts at casting. I mean, you got to get somebody who can do it right off the bat. You got to know they can do it. But it's also about letting the actors, feel their way through the scene. I didn't get to do that much of it on this because it was our first time and I was in the scenes. But there's a part about it that's, if you put an actor in a box and you tell them that they can't go here, here, or here, and it has to be like this, or that, then you're going to stifle their instrument, their one thing that they have, which is trying to feel confident enough to fail, not be embarrassed to try something crazy. And, there's something about kind of going through the scene before you shoot and letting the actor go where they naturally would want to be, and then framing your shot around that. Is an easier way to get them to feel comfortable doing something that they would naturally do.
Yeah, I would say that like the wide shots in The Battery were extremely helpful to the fact that like they had a ton of room to move around. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, like there's just something for me personally, when you look at like the digital video, 'cause even like the 5D, it's great, but it's still video. Super duper close-ups of people, just feel soap opera-ish. Mm-hmm. So like even just like shooting wider like that makes it feel more cinematic, which in turn actually helps their performance. Like there's just something about like those ultra macro close-ups where you can see every pore on their face that makes it feel more like you're watching a movie, and that like you can see the acting because you're right up in the face.
I mean, those are necessary if you're going for a certain style. But I would also say that even though I said the script is, this movie's pretty scripted, I made very clear from the get-go that I'm not precious about my words. That's another way that's a surefire way to get a stilted performance, is if an actor can't feel the line the way it feels natural coming out of their mouth, and yet they feel like they're tied to that verbatim. So just whatever way I was literally reading a script last night for a role I'm going to do. And as I was reading it, I was changing words in the moment and then writing those words down on the script because the way it's written didn't sound natural. I couldn't quite make it flow in a natural way. But if I just tweak this word, change that word, then suddenly it starts to come out more naturally, in the way that I've analyzed that character.
But you weren't like precious about actions at all either. So it's like, that'd be the other thing. Like we weren't precious about locations or actions. We'd be like, you know what, this location's not working out. Let's move over to this location and, hey, maybe they're playing catch in this scene where they weren't playing catch, or maybe they're doing this in this scene.
Yeah, it certainly works for a certain kind of movie. The more, I think just the more freedom you can give an actor to feel like they can move about, find the character's gait and rhythm, and feel their way through the set, then it's just going to get better. The more they feel natural and lived in the moment, the more natural performance you're going to get.
You know, it reminded me a lot of Jim Jarmusch. I don't know if you guys have ever
Absolutely.
gotten that.
Well, thank you very much. That's a good compliment. Yeah, just lived in is what I always go for. I mean, I always say that I will tweak the dialogue until I can read it where it doesn't feel like it's being read anymore, and then I'll say throw it all out if it doesn't work for you. Just get the point of the scene, right? The intent of the scene, and then just get there any way that feels right. And if you have actors who are quick on their feet, if one actor goes a certain way to try to get to the same point in a different way, then the other actor will follow and let them follow.
And then if that doesn't work in the editing room, throw it out. Because we did a lot of that too. Right.
Were you working with a lot of non-actors? I mean, I assume most of the zombies were just friends, right?
Yeah, all the zombies were non-actors. Unfortunately, they're not only were they non-actors, but they were young. We get that a lot. That wow, all the zombies in this movie are the same age as the. Yeah, I get it. We should have cast a more diverse set of extra zombies. But like I said, we didn't do good enough pre-production, so that goes back to that.
Right. Well, talking for a second about the technical aspects, I want to talk to Christian for a second about, in terms of the way you approach this. I assume most of it's natural light. Can you talk about kind of the what you were using? I know you were with the 5D Mark II and you said a Carl Zeiss lens. Can you talk a little bit about how you approached that?
The craziest thing about the movie was that we knew that the last third of it takes place in the back of a station wagon. So, we needed a super wide lens. So I ended up renting a Zeiss 21 millimeter that, on the full frame 5D. That ended up kind of creating the whole look for the movie because it was such a better lens than any that I had that, I tried to use it as often as possible. So then we already knew we wanted to shoot super wide, but then shooting with the 21 millimeter, just really, really opened it up even further. So much so, in fact, that we actually, we didn't shoot, with the intention of having the movie be 235:1. Mm-hmm. We actually cropped it in post, as an afterthought. Like it was just that we realized, wow, these shots are so wide and they looked much better cropped. And it once again, like helped with the film look that we were trying to achieve. So yeah, no, as far as lighting, I just had a $50 LED light that was battery operated because we were in the woods. We had no power. It was only used in a couple scenes. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously the most important thing I had was one of those variable ND filters because so much of it was shot outside in sunlight. And that's the one thing that I notice whenever I get sent something now, someone's like, hey, can you review this? Can you review this? Their shutter speed is it's first time filmmaker, the shutter speed is all over the place. Mm-hmm. And you got that Saving Private Ryan look from shooting at a high shutter speed. So other than that, I didn't really have much equipment. I didn't even have a fluid video head on the battery. I mean, it was crazy. I had an $80 shoulder rig from Optica.
Oh yeah.
That was it. I had a plastic tripod, that I bought at Best Buy. So, I was unprepared, but, we wanted most of the shots to be static. So, I didn't think I needed a fluid video head and all those other things. And, we didn't quite have the budget. So,
yeah. So what were the major things that if you could go back in time, you think would have made things a lot easier for you?
A Steadicam. Absolutely. Because we had discussed everything's going to be stationary. But then, you start making the movie and it's like, oh, well, just, follow along. We're going to walk down this hill over these rocks and, just walk behind us and that kind of stuff. I mean, my ass was saved in post by, Premiere's warp stabilizer.
Oh yeah.
And this is not something you want to rely on. Especially like, it has artifacts and so on that I can see. But we had to do it because we didn't have a Steadicam. Although, like, on the last day of the shoot, one of the producers was like, I got a Steadicam in my trunk. And I wanted to stab him. I absolutely wanted to stab him.
And I would say just, there are certain things about the fact that we didn't get to, we didn't really know how to plan a shoot schedule. So there were some days where we were just overloaded with things we had to get. I mean, when we had the only other two actors in the movie, Alana O'Brien and Niels Bala, we had them scheduled on the same day because they were both coming from New York. And that's 14 pages of dialogue, and then it's raining and then it's, the night is approaching and it's just one of those things where you start to feel, you don't want to feel like you're losing control of your set when you have actors there. And once the elements get involved, it's just like we should never have scheduled both of those actors on the same day, that many pages in one day, but we just had no idea how to schedule a film and we had such a little amount of time to do it. So
yeah, a backup audio recorder would have helped on that day because our audio recorder fried. And we had no other option to record audio. And, we waited 2 hours to get one and then finally gave up and recorded using the mono mic on the SLR. Okay. So yeah, that would have, we would have not just saved the audio quality of that scene, but we would have saved the 2 hours while we were waiting for someone with a video camera to come that had XLR inputs.
Right. But it's another thing that you guys did that's, a lot of indie filmmakers forget about is you hired a guy to be your 100% sound guy, and that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was, that's the, I think throughout our little weird troupe of filmmakers since we've been kids, we've all kind of had our own specialty, but none of us have ever been sound guys. That is a very specialized area to go into. So when the one thing I did do right in pre-production was I put an ad out for a sound guy, and I said, look, I got a little bit of scratch to give you, and I can give you a little back end in the movie. But you've got to stay with us the entire time. You can't go home. I can't be wondering where you are, every day when it's time for call. You're just going to be a part of the crew and you're going to be there. And this guy responded and he was like, that sounds cool. And so I met this guy for a couple pints and, we ended up arguing over the merits of baseball and hockey for about 2.5 hours. And, he's a sound guy now, but he used to be like a roadie. So he's used to like living in a van with musicians and stuff. So day one, he was there. He was sleeping on the couch in the cabins with us, beers at night. He was, doing everything that a grip would do, that a PA would do. And he was doing sound. So he was invaluable. So if you can get yourself, and especially in a small crew, people are going to have to wear many hats. So get a guy who can do sound and black out windows if he needs to.
So what would you say was the hardest, let me ask you about the scheduling. What, if you could go back and possibly what you did for, Tex, we'll talk about that in a second, but what, when you're scheduling and everything, is there a specific tool that you're using now that you didn't have then or something that you're doing now to schedule things out?
We still have not scheduled a movie traditionally.
Or you would like to in the future?
Yeah. Well, I would love to just get a good line producer and do it. They can do it themselves.
Okay.
No, it's just one of those areas that we haven't had to. I mean, Tex, as you will see, was not very well planned in itself either. So we didn't learn a lot from our first effort. But no, but there's little things that are obvious, like when you look back, like, okay, you can't have 40 or 50 extras standing outside for 12 hours a day, 2 days back to back. You got to feed them. You've got to keep them occupied. And there's a way to break that up. But then you realize that you can only have the certain location where those extras can be for 1 or 2 days. Then you start running into issues that we just didn't really concern ourselves with. I mean, there's a moment in the movie where Mickey puts blankets all over the windows in the car because he doesn't want to see the zombies' faces anymore. And luckily, story wise, you can justify that because Mickey just can't deal with the situation. But in reality, we realized after that first day of shooting with all those extras that if we have these extras staring in the windows for the entire 35-minute third act that these characters are in the car, you're going to start to see them get bored. You're going to start to see the zombies looking at the camera. You're going to invite the audience to start looking at the zombies rather than focusing on the characters. But it was in fact just because we couldn't afford to have them out there all that time. So we went back after the first day, brainstormed, came up with that blanket idea, and then moved the car into a garage, into a controlled setting, put a sun lamp out the window and had one person shake it, and then just added the zombie sounds at the end. And that worked fine. That's one of those creative decisions I'm really proud of, but it was one that we might not have had to run into if we had, knew how to schedule a movie.
What was the hardest day on the set?
Yeah, it was the day where the sound broke. I mean, that was the day I quit the movie before the sound broke.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know about that.
That was a bad day.
I quit on text too, I think. I quit the movie. Yeah.
You're not
it's kind of a tradition at this point.
You're not doing it right if someone doesn't quit.
Yeah.
That means it's not hard. That means you're not struggling.
We were trying to make a squib and it was failing and it was a disaster.
That was the day that we had the two actors come in from out of town. I get shot in the legs. We were trying to make a squib out of nothing, out of blood and a condom and like a firecracker. It was raining. You were running out of time. Tensions were high. The sound broke. We ran out of light. It was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. If you watch the documentary, you'll see it's just, once that day is mentioned, everyone sighs. It was a rough day.
Well, I think it's helpful for other filmmakers to realize, that it is such a difficult process because, I think everybody who makes an indie film that doesn't have much of a budget has probably gone through the same thing. And a lot of people quit. A lot of people never make their film.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunate too, because it's the most rewarding and most fun I've ever had. And it's also, the most stressful and crazy, but those two things go hand in hand. And there's nothing like, sitting down with other filmmakers and chewing the fat and listening to them talk about their nightmare moments on set, because then you can relate. Oh yeah, gosh, that's just like when the wasp nest was stuck in the car door and the lawn mowing people came all on the same day on the first day of shooting. It's just like, what is happening here? But that's kind of one of those badges of honor you wear after you made an indie movie on your own.
In terms of the music, can we talk for a second about that and how you were able to get such a great soundtrack?
Absolutely. And thank you. No, it started as, I'm a huge fan of Rock Plaza Central, this band Rock Plaza Central. I've loved them for years. I used to be a big fan and I would go to all their shows. And when we cut together a location scouting video before we'd ever made the movie, we used one of their songs and we kind of put it up on Twitter for people to see what we were going to do. And the lead singer of the band contacted us and said, "Hey, that looks cool. Are you guys going to use our music in the movie as well?" Which had never even occurred to us that would be a possibility. And then he was really kind and put us in touch with his label, and they were they gave us the rights to the songs for literally nothing. Like, I think it was like $500 forever worldwide.
Wow. That's great.
That is great. And even better than that, it's like he put us in touch with the band The Parlor, who has a couple songs in the movie, and they just gave us free reign of all their songs for nothing. And the same thing happened with, Wise Blood, who does the electronic songs in the movie. Adam kind of knew him from college, so he gave us his music. Sun Hotel and El Cantador were some Florida bands that Christian knew from the local scene down here. He talked to them and they let us use their music. You hear a lot of people. One of the most amazing things is no matter where I've gone with this movie, all over the world, whatever language, people always, always ask about the music. And that's so rewarding because there's something that's to be said about, artists helping other artists out. And it was such a beautiful thing for them to do, to let us use their music. And what's been lovely is how often those bands have contacted us and said, "Hey, once the movie came out, we saw a huge uptick in downloads and sales on our music and stuff." So it's just it's one of those things where, look, we can't give you much up front, but if our movie does well, you'll do well. It's it's a symbiotic relationship, and that was amazing. And now we're like great friends with Chris Eaton from Rock Plaza Central. And it's such a weird thing to go from being a fan of somebody and like I shook his hand one time at a show to now he'll like call me up and say, hey, I got this idea for a novel. Like, what do you think about this? And just talk to him about it. And you're like, that's so crazy. You know, it's so crazy to go from fan to peer and collaborator.
But you haven't told him that you were like that, though. I mean, he's not like, hey,
oh,
man, want to shake my hand again?
I 100% told him. I mean, there was literally a show where I was so into it. I was having such a good time that they like handed the microphone to me in the crowd to like hold up to the trombone player because I just wouldn't stop. And then another show, they were like, hey, man, we saw you out there like dancing up a storm like a crazy person. Like, just thanks. I'm like, it's cool that you're like getting into the music a lot. And I was just like, they talked to me. And now it's like I'm going to their house and like, you know, having barbecue with their kids and stuff. It's so wild.
As far as the DVDs and stuff like that and reproduction of their songs, do you guys have to have like contracts and things like that were worked out? Just can you give me an idea of how that all kind of worked out? Just so
most of the bands is were off label and they gave us like the rights to do anything with their music in the movie.
Okay.
Including, I mean, Rock Plaza Central gave us those rights but then they were like, oh, we forgot. We're in Canada. No, we have a label in the US. So we did have to get in contact with their label, but their label basically gave us the rights to use the songs.
Yeah, you definitely have to get, you know, releases signed. You have to get all the bands to sign up. But once you get into deliverables, if you have a distribution deal, you've got to get all the contracts squared away with those artists. But I mean, I can remember, I think one of the bands from Florida happened to be playing in New York City. And Adam, you know, who plays Mickey, our producer, one of our producers, he was like, what, they're in the city right now? And he just like hoofed it down to where they were playing a show and like confronted them. He's like, hey, can you sign this release for that song that's in our movie? It's just like, you gotta get it all squared away. Deliverables is an annoying part of what should be one of the most amazing parts of the process, which is, hey, we're going to distribute your movie. Cool. What do we need to give you? Oh, everything that's ever been made in the world. We have to give you. Oh God, no.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, in general, I mean, we didn't really have to pay for the songs. I mean, I think even the record label deferred the payment until after the Battery was like bringing in money from the distribution. So it was pretty awesome, actually.
Now, can you talk a little bit about your post-production process? I just want to give people a full view of the whole thing and kind of how you went from, taking all, you know, even the minutia of taking the card out of the camera, and did you do backups? Did you, you know, how did post-production work? Can you talk about that?
Oh, I could talk about on the Battery. We had, I'll tell you, we had 2 hard drives on set. I would take the cards out every day when we got back to, we had these little cabins that we were staying in. I would take the card out, put it off onto the 2 hard drives. Then I would move one of the hard drives into the other cabin, just in case one of the cabins got broken into, because we had all this film camera equipment coming in and out. Or it burned down, who knows, you know, so we had 2 separate hard drives every day. And then after that, post-production kind of took like 2 whole years. I mean, it was off and on. I mean, it was.
Well, we never just like jumped into it all at once because we didn't have time because we had day jobs.
But yeah, I mean, my sister and Michael Katzman edited the movie, and then after that, our friend Ryan Winford did the score. But everything else then after that was done by me. So like I did the sound design and the score mixing and the color grading, and then, you know, like the final kind of tweaking to the edit and all that stuff, the deliverables. And that just was like, it's just never done. We would play a film festival and I'd come back and be like, I got to fix that color in that scene. I got to fix the sound in that scene.
But like I said, I mean, we are lucky in that you really are lucky if you have people who can wear many hats, because it's, you know, our editors are, you know, they put together a rough cut for us, and then until I could come down and we could really sit there and hone the edit. But then they also just went off on their own and did like hundreds of Foley sounds for the movie, which we didn't even, you know, think, how are we going to get to Foley? They just went off and did that. Christian's, you know, going into his garage and like recording himself slapping the car like a million different times so he can create that soundscape for all the zombies, like slapping their hands up against the windows. So it's like everybody's doing, jobs they don't know. I remember one thing Christian wanted was somebody to do sound design. And I met a guy, and Christian flew to New York. He flies to New York to meet this guy. And the guy, who's basically like an intern somewhere, and he thinks he's a hotshot, tells us that the movie can't be done in the state it's in.
He said we didn't have enough Foley. We had 1,000 pieces of Foley in the movie. And he said we needed more Foley.
Which means he didn't even notice it was Foley, which is good.
Yeah, and I'm like, we're a $6,000 movie. We have 1,000 pieces of Foley in here. And he's saying, I can't mix it until there's more Foley.
And so Christian goes outside for a cigarette. I walk outside and I'm like, hey man, what's going on? And he's like, fuck it, I'll learn to do it myself. And then that's it. And then he went home and just watched online tutorials and did the sound design himself. Yeah. So hopefully from here on out, what we're hoping is that Christian doesn't have to wear as many hats, because I could see him dying. His hair's graying. He's freaking out because I'm the writer, director, actor guy who gets to do all the fun stuff. And he's just like, I'm coloring the same scene for a year.
I mean, because we added editor. Jeremy and I co-edited the new movie, but I also did the sound recording on the new movie on set. So I was just adding jobs. And this one,
maybe you should just say the things that you didn't do in the credits.
Yeah, exactly. This one, I mean, Tex Montana, all the tech was done by me. The only thing that wasn't was, the score was done by Ryan again. But I recorded the score with him. So, it's just nuts.
Now, was there when you were learning how to do that, were you just going on YouTube, or was there any, just for people who might want to take on something like that?
Yeah.
God help them.
I mean, anything, cause even my other job, I do photography and design. There's a site called lynda.com, LYN.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. That site, I've learned how to do a million things on that site. And it's pretty great because you could just sign up for $20, crunch for a whole month, and then cancel your subscription. And then sign up again when you need a refresher.
Yeah. That's sad because I've done that before.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to take this class, but I don't want to get a membership. So
you can do a 2-week free trial too.
Yeah.
But
did you take Deke McClellan's class?
I think
Deke is kind of the guru over there, because I teach Photoshop. I'm also a graphic designer, but it's funny because I learned Deke was the guy that basically taught me Photoshop back in 98 or something like that. But lynda.com used to also be, I think, Total Training. I think they merged or something. And Total Training you would get 20 VHS cassettes of how to learn Photoshop. But I remember that arriving one day, and I was just so excited to get the Total Training series. Anyway, sorry, I'm off topic.
Right, that's totally, I'm sure, I'm Deke, I would probably recognize him if I saw him. I'm oh yeah. I've seen that guy a million times.
Yeah.
Because I've watched every Adobe program I've watched on there, because I use pretty much every Adobe program in different jobs.
And I would say my advice for all of that is to get yourself a Christian. Because I just want to go right. I don't want to do that shit.
We're going to give Christian's email address and home address at the end of this, so everybody can get in touch with him.
No, I said get yourself a Christian, not mine.
I don't.
He's mine.
Sorry.
I need another Jeremy.
Everyone needs another Christian, but no one needs another Jeremy.
Yeah.
Okay, so and color grading. Can you talk about that for a second? Because you were doing that in DaVinci
Let me just
Resolve.
jump right in here and defer to Christian.
Yeah, you don't know anything about that. Actually, this is crazy now. On the battery, I was using just the built-in color corrector stuff in Premiere. I didn't switch to Resolve until Tex Montana. And that's why I'm still learning Resolve, because it's just kind of a whole mindfuck for me. But yeah, no, the battery was done with the fast color corrector and all this other Premiere tools. And then I think towards the end, Colorista, but that was already when I was after we had premiered the movie. I was going back and fixing some things. But then the major thing I did on the battery was, besides I was color grading it to be really low contrast. I was always bringing up the blacks because I felt like when you have these crushed blacks and these super whites, basically, it's stuff that really you can only do with video. And film didn't really have that because even, film in a theater had this light going through it. So to me, I was like, I'm not gonna ever have true black in the battery. So it was always kind of raised up to like around even like 10 IRE. But anyway, I know. But the most important thing I did on the battery was I bought this film grain loop from a company called Gorilla Grain. And it was like $50 for a real scan of film grain. And I put it over top of that over the battery, because not only did it make it look more like film, but it also helped with, I had been doing a lot of noise reduction, from shooting high ISO at night. So that, when you use, I was using Neat Video for noise reduction, and, when you do that, like things start to look plasticky and fake. And the film grain really kind of gets rid of that plastic look. But now that I shoot with the C100, I'm using DaVinci Resolve because there's just so much more color information there.
Right. So, you're shooting ProRes?
Yeah, I'm shooting into a ProRes Atomos Ninja 2 recorder.
Okay.
And it's so much more, it's like night and day from the battery. So I was saying, like, Tex Montana Will Survive is a found footage movie. Yet on a technical level, it's way better looking than the battery is.
Okay. I don't want to put Jeremy to sleep over there, so let's talk about...
Are you kidding me? I have recordings of Christian talking tech, and I just listen to it as my lullaby. Yeah, I've just heard it 1,000 times, but people do need to know this shit.
As you were making the film, were you thinking about distribution? Were you concerned with trying to build up social awareness of the, what was your idea towards the marketing?
We didn't really have one. Honestly, I think that a lot of times, speaking of things that could derail your production, putting the cart before the horse is one of the main issues too. They'll spend a month making a poster for a movie they haven't even considered getting out there and actually making. So it was really just about one thing at a time, right? Let's make a movie first. Let's see if we've got a movie first, and then okay, well, let's see how we can get people to see it. And then it became, the festival circuit, trying to get into festivals, and then, getting a trailer cut together that's interesting enough where you might get some people a little bit of buzz about it, get it to some websites that traffic in those things, and just start to build an awareness. But it really wasn't until the festival circuit kind of kicked up that we started building an online presence, and then going to those festivals and glad handing and meeting people and talking to them, is really the only way you're going to get noticed in, because there's so many people making movies now. The only way you're going to rise to the top is to get into festivals, get seen, be there, meet as many people as possible, be nice, be humble, have drinks with them, make yourself available.
What were some of the more important festivals for the film in terms of like what you guys, connections and things like that, or what were the most fun ones?
Oh, the fun ones there's so many fun ones. I mean, the first one we got into was the Telluride Horror Show, in Colorado, which was amazing. That was our world premiere, and we were super excited about that. And then after that, we didn't get into anything for months. I mean, it got really demoralizing. You start throwing $50 a pop at these festivals and not hearing anything, and it's like you're chucking money into a hole and you have no idea what's going on. And then out of the blue, we got an email from Imagine, in Amsterdam, which is a big genre festival that's been going on out there for about 25 years. And we got into that. And then because they are a part of, kind of a genre, like an international genre, like coalition almost of film festivals, other film festivals that were in that same union started, asking for the movie. So there's this weird thing that happens where at first you're spending a lot of money to submit to festivals and not hearing anything. Then you get into one, and then suddenly other festivals know that that's happening, and then they start saying they're going to waive their submission fee. And then at some point, not only do they waive the submission fee, they just invite you to screen there, period. And then at some point, they start flying you out, and they start paying you screening fees to show your movie. So it's this really weird process where if you're lucky enough to catch a little bit of fire on the festival circuit, you can go from spending money to making money and getting to see the world. So Imagine definitely was what kickstarted that. And then from there we won the audience award there, which has been won by like Silence of the Lambs and, The Raid and Donnie Darko and From Dusk Till Dawn, all these like great big genre movies. And we won that award somehow. And I know that's just because we were there. We were there for a week. We were having beers with people. We were shaking hands. We do lively Q&As and and it's part of the politics of building an audience and hoping that they'll follow you to your next project. It's just saying, I know I'm living in a dream right now, and I want to be respectful and humble of the entire process. So it's that was really fun. Then we went to Dead by Dawn in Scotland and won the audience award there. And then we went to Brazil and Mexico City. Fantasia was a sold out crowd, even though we were already released in the United States, which was kind of a hang up. They weren't sure if they could play it. They decided to take a chance on us anyway, and it was completely sold out. There was still a line outside when they shut the doors. We ended up giving up our own seats, so some more people could squeeze in. Just a really amazing process to go all over the world, going down to Brazil and we were the opening night film at Macabro in Mexico City, like 500 people in the theater, like red carpet and flash bulbs but these things really, like, they help you build traction and now to see on this Kickstarter campaign, how many of those people from all over the world have kicked in that we don't even know is incredible. And that's just from not taking your audience for granted. And of course it helps that, the thing I said at the beginning of this whole process was, if we do at least come close to what I'm trying to do here, which is make this interesting, artsy, character-driven zombie movie, the gatekeepers of the indie horror world will respond to it. And then, to get people like Ain't It Cool News and Bloody Disgusting and Fangoria and Dread Central, all these people to write really positive things about the movie just really helped push it along.
Were you doing anything, or was it just like once you got the first festival, what was it, Imagine?
Imagine, yeah.
Once you got that, all these things just started happening without a whole lot of effort from you guys, or were you still like out there pushing it and promoting it?
I mean, we were always pushing it in our way, through Twitter, and you send a couple emails here and there, but it's amazing how many people find it on their own. You can try morning, noon, and night to get press for something and never hear a word. And then as soon as something happens, you can't stop it. It just takes off on its own. It really is crazy. I mean, it's like the catch-22 about, getting an agent. Like, you can't get an agent unless an agent comes looking for you, and by then you need an agent. It's just one of those weird things where it's just you're not going to get press until the press hears about you, until they can't ignore you anymore. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we talk about with our marketing, the film marketing program, is the idea that you need to be, if you go to you need to be the person that's already kind of in front of like horror fans or zombie fans, So if you're getting on Bloody Disgusting or Fangoria or whatever, there's no way you could do that on your own. Those people already have that fan base.
Right. Well, there are little things too, right? So even though we want this movie to stand on its own as a film, it definitely helped that we were able to, every time we were talking about it at a Q&A or whatever, to say that we made it for $6,000, because it was the truth, but it's also, it's a clear marketing hook, right? People are going to write about that. So it was one of those things where we actually talked about, like, do we really want to talk about the budget for this movie, or do we want to just let it exist on its own merits? But at some point it was just like, you know what? It's too good of a marketing hook.
And The Walking Dead helped as well, which the movie was conceived before The Walking Dead premiered. But that was major.
Yeah, there's little things like that. And, what was I just going to say? I don't know.
I'm glad I threw you off.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for popping in there and talking about The Walking Dead.
Well, I'm saying that zombies don't hurt. But we were not planning on that at all. In fact, it might have actually like stunted the movie if zombies were as big as they are now. I don't know if we
Well,
would've
I mean,
made this.
even when it came out, I heard zombie fatigue all over the place. And it was like, oh boy, here we go. I mean, it got to the point where when I told people I made a movie, I would say, oh yeah, I made this little like artsy horror movie. I wouldn't say the zombie word unless I was pressed, because it's just, you hear so many people just completely shut down when they hear zombie. And that's just annoying. That always annoys me. I always said, like, nothing is worn out if someone makes a good one. I mean, you can make 500 vampire movies and be sick of them all, but as soon as someone makes a good one, it's like, oh, the return of the vampire film. It's just because someone made a good one again.
It really is, when you're making a zombie film, it's never about the zombies. It's always about the human, Walking Dead is not about zombies at all.
It's a
about
soap
the
opera.
human. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and that's the way it should be. Right? I mean, it got to the point where I was even considering very briefly when it was, it was difficult for us to try to get, makeup for the movie. I was like, you know what? Let's just put all of the zombies in t-shirts with a Z on it. And then don't even deal with the zombie makeup, just to prove that this is more about the characters than the zombies. That'll really piss people off and be weird, but that was maybe a little too esoteric.
So, okay, let's talk about distribution.
No.
Can you discuss the distribution aspect of The Battery?
Yeah. Okay. No. Yes. All right. No, it's, well, so, after we got to that first festival, Telluride Horror, we were approached by Film Buff about the digital rights, the worldwide digital rights.
Okay.
And, like I said, between Telluride and Imagine, we didn't have a lot going on. It felt like, okay, that was it. That was our, we're winding down now. So let's do this. Let's get on this train. And, of course, then the movie takes off and you start to wonder, oh boy. And we got approached by a lot of people saying, oh, you've already given away your worldwide digital rights. Are you crazy? And, that's a lesson you got to learn, is that you got to, it's a hard lesson to learn if you've never done it. The business side is so difficult to navigate, if you're just coming into it. I think far more difficult to navigate than actually making a movie. Because every time you do something, someone tells you made the wrong decision. But through having that, at some point we were able to get our international rights back from them, because we realized that they weren't really interested in selling the international rights. They were really more focused on getting the movie out in America. And excuse me. We met a woman named Annick Mannert who saw the film at a festival in France, and she has been just an incredible champion of this movie from the moment she saw it. She actually flew to Germany while we were there, and had brunch with us, and has just been working tirelessly to get us into festivals. And she works with Raven Banner in Canada as an international sales agent, and got them to take the movie on, and they were able to go out and sell it to territories across the world. And then, speaking of getting a champion, AJ Bowen, the actor, when he saw the movie, he didn't stop talking about it at all. And he would go on podcasts and mention it. And he would mention it to the point where the hosts of those podcasts they're like, all right, we got to watch this movie. This guy won't shut up about The Battery. And then they watched it, and then they wouldn't stop talking about it. And it just so happened that they had frequent guests on, who run Scream Factory and Shout Factory. And because they talked about it so much, finally Scream Factory was like, all right, let's see what this movie that these guys won't shut up about is. And then we were able to get a DVD and Blu-ray deal from Scream Factory, which is just, I think we grew 2 feet tall. Our heads couldn't fit through the doors. It's just amazing, because you're told right off the bat that you're not going to be able to get a physical distribution deal if you've given away your digital rights. But those guys just make such beautiful physical, things in a digital world now, that luckily they were able to just take a flyer on us, and we got to put this amazing Blu-ray out with this documentary, which covers all the ground you're making us cover right now. I'm kidding. But it is a fantastic documentary. You should really, I encourage everybody to check it out if they can, because we basically made that exactly what we were talking about earlier, which is my film school was watching DVD extras and listening to podcasts. And so we made a 90-minute feature-length documentary that goes from those stupid short films we were making in high school all the way to the festival circuit on the Battery. And it goes through every step of the process. And we really wanted it to be where somebody sees this and they're like on the cusp of thinking, can I make a movie or not? Then this would push them over and say, just go do it. Cause it's going to be hard, but it's going to be amazing.
Now the documentary is only available with the DVD and the Blu-ray. Is that right? Or is it?
Yeah, for now it is. It's only on the North American Blu-ray DVD release by Scream Factory. But we're looking into whether or not we can put it up online for free. Because I think it's promotion for the DVD and Blu-ray. And it's like we were saying, it's a really, really wonderful kind of thing for filmmakers. But
I'm
we'll
almost
see.
more proud of it than I am of the Battery, just because, because if I had, had seen something so thorough and, so naked about the, the ups and downs of the process, I would have been like, that's it, we're doing this thing. And that's what we were hoping.
And oh God, I worked on that documentary for like 6 months.
But it's like $10 for the DVD or something on Amazon. And you get that and the movie and the commentaries and the outtakes and stuff like that. So and we really tried to pack it with as much, if you want to make a movie, watch this stuff as you can. I don't even know where we started with that question. What was it? Distribution? Oh yeah, distribution.
Yeah. I think what he was getting at was just that, for first time, movie, or our first movie, there's a lot of like legal stuff and lawyers and expenses and so on that happen in distribution. So, and on the Battery, we had like 10 investors. So not a lot of that money trickles down to us in the end. But like just due to the system, like the whole system in general. It's not like Scream Factory didn't pay well. They paid great.
It's just one of those things where you have to do. I wish I could create a list of things you need to do once you start to enter the distribution process of making a movie, but it is literally so dense and there are so many possibilities. I almost feel like you just kind of have to read as much as you can and then wade in and then make a decision, because the amount of options that we had that we didn't know we were going to have when we made one decision, that suddenly another avenue opened up later. If we hadn't done this, we could have done that. There's just no way to navigate it. And we try as hard as we can. We've had, filmmakers email us and contact us and ask us about particular, distribution companies or deals or what. And it's just like, man, if it feels right, do it. There's just no, you're going to learn from the process. Is the only way to really go about it. I mean, I'm sure someone out there can elucidate much more, with much better clarity than I can on this part of the process. But it was easily the most difficult part of the entire process for us to navigate, was the business side and the distribution side. I think you just kind of got to learn as you go.
The thing that's interesting, listening to that is when you say it's a $6,000 movie, I've heard people that work in independent film talk about just the deliverables costing more than that.
I mean, when it comes to distribution, a lot of the deliverable stuff was just like written off of our payment. Okay. So, that's like, I think like maybe the entire first year of the release, I mean, like just everything went to expenses. So yeah, we didn't have to pay for a lot of things up front, but, yeah, we had but I always say that the $6,000 is the production budget. That's what it cost us to get to the premiere at Telluride Horror Show. Okay. And then we did have some business related expenses after that, but we already had deals on the table that we were ready to sign. So, like I know one for a fact was, what's called errors and omissions insurance. Yeah, and that was like $4,000 that we had to pay, and I think Adam got a personal loan from his father or something, and then he got paid back eventually. But we had deals on the table at that time. We would have never paid for that if we didn't.
I mean, there are certain things you can do to make it easier to navigate, like just make sure you've got all your your performance releases signed by your actors. Make sure that you've got a chain of title, in order. There are things that you're going to just look up a list of the typical deliverables. And then there are certain, there are certain ones that you can check off before you even make the movie or while you're in pre-production that we just didn't even think about until we were done.
But I'm pretty sure that as far as like the business expenses of the Battery, maybe had, I think, that plus creating an LLC for like $2,000. I think those might have been the only ones that we paid up front. And then the rest were deducted later on through distribution companies and so on. And not to say that that wasn't a lot. It was a lot. It was just we didn't have to pay it up front.
Yeah, when you get your first report of your residuals and you see that gigantic chunk that goes to expenses, you just go, oh, that was like 3 months' rent or more.
So yeah, I kind of wanted to go into the things that Jeremy discussed in his article on Movie Maker, because it really is something that I think a lot of filmmakers don't talk about, and people don't want to, first of all, people don't ever want to talk about pirating, and what a big deal it is now, and how easy it is for people just to download anything they want for free, and how much that affects you guys on the distribution side, and can we talk about how that's affected the way that your newest project?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, because it's something I don't think he put in the article, was that, like the day our movie was released, the piracy was, within 3 hours of the iTunes release, the piracy was just insane. But even like a year later, there was a day where some piracy group released a version of our movie, and it was like the 30th torrent of our movie. And there was 100,000 downloads of that torrent in 24 hours. Wow. In that same 24 hours, we were selling the movie DRM free on our website for $5. In that same 24 hours, we sold 2 copies. We made $10. And all of our other digital sales had kind of just slowed to a halt at that point. So it was like there were 100,000 stolen in one day, a year after release. We make $10 that day. It's the ratio that's insane. Like piracy's kind of a way of life at this point. I get it, but the ratio should be far, far less. Like I would say there's got to be anywhere from 20 to 80 illegal downloads per every one real rental. That's just way too high.
Yeah, and those are never going to translate 1-to-1. For if everybody who pirated it bought it instead, well, that's never going to happen. That's just not the way it works. I think I did touch on in the article that it is easy to vilify the piracy community because, yes, they're causing a lot of issues in the movie business. I mean, where a $5 million budget 5 years ago, you could wrangle with. Companies who fund those movies now are really, really hemming and hawing over $250,000 budget because they know that the second that movie's released on demand, it's going to be pirated. And so the risks go way higher. And so the budgets are driven way down. Less movies are made, which means less crew jobs. There's so many things that it affects that people don't know. And I think people tiptoe around the piracy issue because you're never going to get the pirates. The people who torrent on your side are the ones who believe that everything should be free and information is free and screw you and I don't care. You're never going to get those guys. But there is an interesting contingent of the piracy population who, number one, would download it if they could, if it were available in their territory. And there is something to be said about the fact that the way that movies are distributed nowadays is not taking into account the fact that the world is completely connected. Everybody knows what's going on in the movie world everywhere in the world. And so, I can remember even myself, years ago hearing all about The Loved Ones. That was an Australian horror movie, right? And it's just like you hear so many great things about it and you never know when is this coming out here? And you keep hearing people talk about it and you're like, am I ever going to get to see it? And it ended up getting dumped in the US like 4 years later. But it's one of those things where it just seems crazy not to hit on, hit on the audience when they're ready for it, when they want it. So that's one part of the piracy thing that needs to be taken care of. Another one is that I just genuinely feel that there is a certain amount of people out there, especially of a certain age group, who absolutely have no idea the devastation it causes throughout the industry. Movies are not what they used to be when I was a kid. I begged to be taken down to the video store, and I would stay in there for 2 hours. They were things that I knew were made, and they were big, and then you had to go and get them, and you had to pay for them, and sometimes you didn't like them, and that's part of the process. You gamble a little bit with your money, and maybe you see the greatest thing you've ever seen, and maybe you see a turd, but that's part of the process. Now there's a generation that just simply thinks of them as little tiny thumbnail posters that you click on, and then they play, and that's it. And there's no heft to the process and the amount of people and time that goes into making these movies anymore. And I think that's just a re-education that needs to happen, or it might not even be able to happen. I just don't know if you can convince a generation that gets it for free why they shouldn't get it for free anymore. It's a real sticky, prickly issue to bring up.
I think that another huge thing is just the fact that people aren't going to theaters anymore too. And it's like everything's become just digital files now. And we've gotten so far from the days when you had to go to a theater and watch a film, and then many, many months later, you would be able to rent a copy at your local video club, and sometimes they wouldn't have it. It's that whole culture has disappeared.
Oh, it's completely gone. And I miss it. And yeah, I mean, even in, the movie that changed my life, that made me like super aware that movies were made, was Jurassic Park. That might sound crazy, but that was the first time I started thinking about
Jurassic.
Well, it's one. I remember someone telling me, "Hey, the dinosaurs are made with computers," and my brain, my like little 12-year-old brain, just went like, "What? Like that's not possible. What do you mean they're made with computers?" And suddenly I started thinking about the behind-the-scenes process of making a movie, and I cut my first lawn, much to my father's chagrin, because he'd been trying to get me to mow the lawn for years. I mowed my first lawn to get money to go see Jurassic Park, because I saw it 7 times in theater, and that movie didn't come out on VHS for over a year after it was in the theater. It was just like waiting for this thing to come out so you can have it, and that's just gone now. The movie comes out, people go see it opening night, opening weekend, kind of fizzles out, and then 90 days later or less, you can download it or steal it or rent it online.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times, here it's like you'll see the movie will come out in like a torrent or something even before it comes to a theater. It's ridiculous, and I've been making an effort to try and see everything in a theater now, and it's so different, the concentration that you have and the way that you're affected by the movies. I mean, even watching it on a great big HD TV, it's just not the same.
No, it's not. It's a whole different experience. And what's crazy is, you're right, it's this communal thing that I love it, and more people should engage with. I was actually, my mother, she's not a huge like cinema person, but I'm down in Florida and I get to see her for the first time in a while, and she'll always tell me she tried to watch this movie and she couldn't get into it, because I know she's just sitting there distracted. She's got her phone, she's got Facebook, and I took her to the movies for the first time in like 20 years. We saw a couple movies in the last couple weeks, and to watch her sit there and fully focus on the movie and like follow it and be engaged with it, because she knows she can't pick her phone up or leave, is just like, oh yeah, that's why you go to the theater. You go to the theater to commit to the experience of letting a story wash over you, not with your phone, and not with going to the bathroom and getting up and going to the kitchen. It's just, you're there, you're in it.
Well, it depends on where you go too, because it drives me nuts, but people that just bring out their cell phone in the middle of the movie. I mean, I had to like yell at a guy the other day because he was just sitting there checking his Facebook in the middle of something, I don't remember what, or Star Wars.
It's just, it boggles my mind with the amount of, I mean, it's clear at this point that it is a serious social faux pas, and people still do it.
Yeah. It's funny because I was listening to your interview on the critics, what's it called? The review podcast.
Facing the Critics?
Facing the Critics.
And your comments about, well, let me put it this way. One of the greatest experiences I ever had in a theater was watching Dances with Wolves.
Oh, great.
And I really loved the fact that you were saying that how good that movie was and how people have kind of forgotten about it, because I watched it recently and I didn't realize I was watching the director's cut, which is like 12 hours long,
Yeah.
cause I was supposed to go to a friend's house later and I was like, yeah, I'm sitting here watching Dances with Wolves, but it's not ending here. It's been on for the last 4 hours and we're still not to the midpoint. Yeah. But it's such an amazing movie, and I don't ever see having that kind of experience again. I don't know, movies just aren't made like that anymore.
No, they're not. And that's another thing that people don't understand about what piracy has done, right? You want to know where those movies, I mean, Dances with Wolves didn't cost that much money, but you want to know where those mid-range budget movies have gone, those adult movies, those grown-up movies. I mean, when I was in high school, I saw every single movie that came out. I can remember going and seeing Return to Paradise. Did you ever see that movie? That's a drama. Phoenix? Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, yeah. Vince Vaughn, Anne Heche. Yeah. It's a movie that time has completely forgotten, and yet it was a movie that came out on a Friday, and I went and saw it. You know what? I loved it.
And it could never be released.
No
today.
one would ever make that like $30 million, drama about should they go back and take a guy out of a Malaysian prison. And that
movie was such a downer. It was just really rough.
But it's like, what's the budget of Bone Tomahawk?
Like 1.2 or $1.8 million.
I mean, that movie, just 15 years ago would have been like a $15-25 million movie.
Yeah.
And in theaters, everywhere.
Yeah, it is strange, but but that's the thing is so now because of that, because they need to milk every single dollar out of that opening weekend. That's why you're getting so many giant superhero movies. That's why you're getting sequels. That's why you're getting, because they have to curb every possible risk. They can't take a risk on some of these small movies. I mean, luckily there's people like Megan Ellison and Annapurna Pictures putting money into these auteurs movies, but for the most part, the movies that filled the bulk of the year, 10 years ago, they just aren't being made anymore because you got to get that 4-quadrant picture out. So you're either talking about movies being made under $1 million or over $100 million. And it's just a weird thing in the middle.
Giant movies, would Jerry Maguire be made today?
Yeah, that was a huge hit. And would somebody greenlight Jerry Maguire? Probably not.
Or I think you could get a movie. Just, look at David O. Russell and guys like that, Wes Anderson and P.T. Anderson and those guys. I mean, they can get stuff made, but it's because they have the brand name. They know there's going to be an audience for that.
Right, but even them, you're talking about, again, that's Megan Ellison. She's a billionaire's daughter who's decided to take her money and give it to directors who aren't the Master, she's funded a ton of those movies, like the David O. Russell movies too. She decided to put her money behind artists, where the studios are afraid to sometimes. I mean, even look at Spielberg was saying he was having trouble getting money for Lincoln. It was going to be a TV movie. Because he couldn't get the money to make it as a theatrical movie. It's just crazy how afraid Hollywood is of taking chances anymore. And a lot of that is because those movies are swallowed up by torrents.
Well, I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about Tex Montana Will Survive. Can we do a segue into that and talk about how you've approached that, and especially this kind of unique way that you guys are using Kickstarter to fund it? Or it's not being funded, but it's a way to control the distribution process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tex Montana Will Survive is a movie. We shot it 2 years ago, but then our day jobs took hold again. But we're trying to use Kickstarter to basically buy them. We want the internet to buy the movie off of us. The way that someone would go to Sundance and buy a movie for $1 million off of filmmakers. We want the internet to do that. We want it's a finished film, and we want, if we hit our goal, we're just going to give the movie to the internet via Creative Commons. So that way torrenting will be completely allowed and encouraged. We'll have DVDs that you can burn with artwork that you could print, and we'll have it on YouTube and Vimeo. So this was kind of our reaction to piracy, which is that rather than vilify the torrents, let's use them as a distribution method. And hopefully it works.
Yeah, the days are ticking down, but it's a way to try and get a hold of those people who did torrent the movie who would have paid for it as well. We put up a comment on some of our torrents on some of these torrent sites a couple of years ago, just saying, look, we're not passing judgment, but we're day job filmmakers, we're barely getting by. We made this movie for $6,000. If you like what you see, consider kicking in. And we had a lot of people donate money through that. And so those are the kind of people who use torrents that we're hoping that we can get ahead of time rather than slowly letting the movie roll out traditionally like The Battery did and having people in Australia go, well, I don't know when it's going to be in Australia, so I'm just going to download it now. So if we can just get it all up front, then maybe we'll have the cushion to take time off work and make a movie, and then everybody everywhere in the world can see it at the same time if they want to.
So does that mean that you don't have, I mean, when you do Creative Commons, does that mean that you no longer have ownership of it, or how does that work?
The particular there's a couple Creative Commons licenses, but the one we're going to be using, basically means that, you have to give us credit for the movie, and that you can't profit off of the movie itself. As in the audience can't profit off the movie, but the audience will be allowed to like remix it or so on. Like if they wanted to take audio from it and use it in something that they make, they can make profit off of that. So, you're kind of allowed to mess with the movie. But other than that, you're totally allowed to share it and do everything else. So the only thing is that we still have to get credit and,
basically you can't just put it in your own box and sell it as is in a store, but you can use it to remake art, right? It's artists saying, here's a piece of art. If you want to make a different piece of art from our art, by all means do it.
Yeah. If you want to sample it and put it into a dance mix, you can, and you can make money off that dance mix. We're not, that's the kind of license that it is.
I think the bare bone bongo scene would be great as a rave.
My friend already did this. The composer already did that.
I'm sure someone else could do it out there too, though. I would love to be in like Prague and hear like baby bear boom 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 boom. That would be amazing.
You watch it, it becomes like this huge hit. The guy's like a millionaire, like
it's
like size
number one dance song in the world is Baby Bare Bones by like Skrillex or something.
Yeah, and we're over here going, why did we do this?
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna. Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I liked about your article too was just your kind of honesty about how difficult it is to make a living as an indie filmmaker. And since we're all about indie filmmaking, can you talk a little bit about that, the idea of being able to make a living as a filmmaker and what you guys do, which is more like you have day jobs and you make indie films? I mean, is there a goal to move everything to being like 100% filmmakers? What is your view on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's my goal. That's 100% my goal is I just want to make movies for a living. And I'm not talking about, making movies and being like a multi-millionaire, even though that would be nice. I would just love to make a comfortable living and make movies as a job, and it doesn't seem like it should be that difficult. I mean, when you see the money that can come in from a small budget movie, I mean, this is sustainable if you could start getting enough, time to make movies and put more movies out in the world. It kind of snowballs. I mean, I know Joe Swanberg famously said that too. He's like, once you get 3 or 4 movies out in the world, every time you make another one, then you get another press push. Everyone talks about your other movies. You get a kick up on the rentals or the sales of those previous movies, and it just kind of snowballs every time. And so he's made a career out of just making like 1 million movies and just kind of living that way. But I do believe there's a way to build an audience slowly and get enough of a return so that you can keep equity in your own movie the next time you make it, and then make a little bit more money the next time you release another movie, and suddenly you're sustaining yourself by telling stories and making art. I do believe it's possible. I don't know. I'm getting old. I'm gonna die, so probably not. It's gonna happen soon, or I'm definitely gonna be managing a bar somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a couple of filmmakers who are full-time, not necessarily making their own projects, but they're directors for hire or whatever.
Those are
and they say that. Sorry,
I said those are called unicorns.
Unicorns are the people making films for a living. But no, he's saying they're directors for hire, not making their own thing.
Well, I mean, the thing that they've said is that it's not like before where you'd like make a film every 3 years. It's like these people are making 2-3 films a year. And there's just this mass production.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that's what we've been saying forever. We need to generate content. I mean, you look at the people making a ton of money on YouTube because they're putting up content every week. Everyone wants more stuff. If we could get to the point where we were shooting a movie, in finishing all post-production within, 9-10 months and then starting work on another movie at the end of the same year, then, that's the goal, is to be able to like maybe start working on 2 movies a year, one at the beginning, one at the tail end.
Jeremy always talks about that, and I'm like, but I'm doing all the post-production.
No, but that's the whole point too, is to make enough money to where he doesn't have to do that anymore. And luckily, and that's another thing that you'll realize, once you start doing this, is that you build a network. And, now we've met people who will do those jobs for us, who we can hire, who we trust to do those jobs, and it could fit within the budget that we're talking about, so that Christian doesn't have to do everything. I mean, eventually you'll meet people who can help you in this process. I mean, the network of filmmakers that we've met since we toured the Battery has been invaluable.
But it's always hard. It's always hard to even think about like scaling up like that and being like, can you keep the quality up 2 times a year? That's scary. I mean, like, just in 3 years, you have 6 movies, and it's like, man, I can't even imagine 3 years from now having 6 movies out there.
Right.
And having them all be quality. So that's scary too.
Yeah, that's another thing. Well, especially with the way I write, it'll never happen. I can't.
Yeah.
That's another thing too, is like, I have thought about a lot that I wish I could just pull my standards down a little bit, It's like, maybe my standards don't seem high to everybody else, but I have serious quality standards with what I write and what I feel like is worth making. The same way Christian has ridiculous standards about, what he does technically with the camera and color and sound and everything like that. Like, he will futz with something for weeks, and I'll just be like, let it go. But I'll be the same way with the scene. I'll tweak a scene while I'm writing it forever. And it's just one of those things where you're never going to get enough done, to create this kind of a content generator like we're talking about if we have such high standards. But I don't know. There's got to be a middle ground somewhere.
It seems like, with the following that you guys have been building, have you ever considered approaching a production company? I mean, going and, putting together a script and saying, okay, and going for more of a traditional, not so ultra independent, but going, and have you been able to keep that following? I mean, do you have like some way to be in touch with your fans? Is it primarily Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't even touch on this. Yeah. One of the main other reasons we made Tex Montana is because I wrote a script that I love, that, I started getting a lot of attention after the Battery made the rounds. I started doing the water bottle tour. I've talked to the companies. I've talked to agents, and I've gotten very close. We've gone down the whole casting route path, and we've gotten far along the route to the traditional funding of making my new script. And then it always just kind of fizzles out in one way or another. You hear that, oh, we love your unique voice, and it's so interesting, and it's so you. And then, once you get up to like $250,000-$300,000, they start trying to kind of, buff a little bit of that personality out of it. Well, can't we explain where the monster comes from? And can't we cast this person even though they're way too young? And it just becomes like, oh man, the concessions you have to make for such a small amount of money is demoralizing. And after about a year and a half of that, that's why we decided, let's just go back in the woods and make Tex Montana, because we wanted to not have to get permission to make a movie again. It's so frustrating to feel like you got your foot in the door in a business that you love, and then it's just the wheels turn so slow that you just like, at some point we got to go do this again, because it's going to tear our souls apart if we keep waiting for somebody to say, okay, here's the money, go make your movie. So that, even though, and honestly, it's still happening right now. Like that script is still out there. I'm on the cusp of going down another avenue to get that movie made. And it's, I feel really good about this one, but I felt really good about some before. So I've gotten a little bit cynical about that process. And so there's a part of me that says, you know what? That's fine. Let that script do what it's going to do through the system. And let's still remind ourselves that we got to go and make our own movies if no one ever gives us the permission.
Plus there's something that like nobody ever talks about, but it's crazy with all of these budgets getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If a production company comes to you and hires you on as director for a $250,000 movie, your pay as director is probably around $5,000. And then you're expected to work on the movie for pretty much a solid year, and then promotion and so on. And it's like, how do you even make a $250,000 movie and live off of $5,000 for a year and a half to 2 years while you make and promote the movie? It's kind of insane.
And no one has been able to explain that to me. No, literally no one. I've talked to filmmakers I know like who seem very successful. And no one's been able to explain, okay, you get a fee, you get your rate for actually filming the movie. But what about when it's time to go into post and it's time to, edit and then do sound and then promote and then how are you making a living then? No one can explain it. I still don't know. 5 years after making The Battery, we've made another movie. I've talked to people. I've gotten meetings. I've talked to managers. I've talked to heads of studios. I have no idea how you're supposed to live.
I mean, that $5,000 would be gone before you come out of pre-production. You just 2 or 3 months of rent and food and so on. If you're making a $250,000 movie, you got to make a really good movie. So you really got to be in there, doing months of pre-production and months of post-production and months of promotion. It's just, it seems crazy to me.
I do feel like that's one of the pitfalls of the fact that everybody can make a movie now is that it's almost expected that just deal with it. I remember that, I don't know why this popped into my head, but there's a scene in A League of Their Own where they reveal that the girl baseball players are going to have to wear these little skirts and everyone guffaws and he goes, ladies, there are 64 women getting on a bus back home right now that'll play in a bikini if I ask them to. And you kind of get that feeling where it's like, hey, if you can't make a movie and live for this fee, then hey, I got a line of kids who want this job. I got a line of filmmakers who want to be in this position. Sorry, that's just the way it is nowadays. And it's just like, God, is that really?
And from a production standpoint, it's kind of like, well, don't you want your director to not be worrying about how he's paying the rent? That's the last thing he needs to be worrying about when he's in charge of your, even $500,000 movie. So that's something, we can't crack it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of ego going on there and people don't really disclose.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I have a friend, who's a filmmaker, a pretty successful filmmaker, and, he decided to go around it and raise the money for his movie on his own and then just paid himself a decent salary, out of the budget. This is how much I'm raising the money to make this movie on this budget. This is how much I'm paying myself to do it. I wrote it, I'm going to direct it, and that's that. And, I was like, well, that's a pretty good way to do it if you can get around all the gatekeepers and just be your own production company. So I don't know. This sounds like a demoralizing way to go out.
So what advice do you have to indie filmmakers that are out there that want to make their first film and want to kind of follow in your footsteps?
You got to have friends. You got to have friends who will help you out. People who are going to be in the trenches with you, in the mud, splashing around in the dirt, willing to do anything they can to get it done. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't have loyal people on your side. You gotta plan as much as you can ahead of time. And you got to write, your story, a good story around what you can get, what you have. And then you gotta not freak out about the things that you think might fail or you'll never do it.
And my advice would be that you got to have at least one skill that you can sell to others, whether it be cinematography or sound design or any of that. That's where your money is likely to come in the first couple films, is from the work in between making your own films. Just like we have friends that are editors and so on, and they go and they get paid to edit other people's movies, and then they edit their movies for free.
Yeah, and the irony of this whole process is that I only wrote The Battery originally because I didn't want to go and audition for roles as an actor, and I'm about to be in my 5th feature film since The Battery came out, and that's simply from meeting filmmakers on the festival circuit, becoming fans of their work and them fans of my work, and then them calling me up and going, hey, I'm about to go and make this movie. I got a great role for you in it. And just suddenly I'm being cast without auditioning when, this whole thing was me railing against the process of auditioning. So you end up, you find a little skill and hopefully you can tangentially work in film.
I actually forgot to ask you about that. What was the experience of working on Spring like? Because that's actually one of my favorite movies from, the past couple of years. What was that working with Justin and Aaron?
It was amazing. Justin and Aaron were actually the first filmmakers I met on the circuit. We met them very briefly in Amsterdam. I thought they were full of themselves. Then we met them again for much longer in Brazil, and they told us that they thought we were full of ourselves when they saw us in Amsterdam. And then we became great friends, and I loved them to death. We had a wonderful time. And just being on their set's amazing because those two guys, I mean, Justin's a really, really, really clever and creative screenwriter and director. And Aaron is just, he's like Justin's Christian. He's he's an incredibly talented guy and he's really technical. So to watch them kind of confer, with each other on set about a scene and then break up and then go and do their individual things is amazing. To watch that set work like clockwork really helped me, cache things away for the next time I'm directing too. It's really great.
Was there a lot of, it seemed like the scenes were very loose and kind of.
Yeah, well, it's funny too because they definitely let me improv. I think that the part of that was me learning on the fly what it's like to be on a real set, because, things got to move. You got to make lunch. You got to make your days. You got to make your time. The 80s walking around talking, and you start to worry that if you goof off or follow a thread down some weird improv line, that you're gonna throw off the entire schedule of the day. So I kind of boxed myself in a little bit, and I didn't really go as far as I'd have wanted to, but they were certainly open to my improv lines. What's interesting is you throw out an improv, and then they'll either say nothing or say, "Oh my God, that was really funny. Do that again," or "Actually, this time don't do that thing." But I was really boxing myself in. And then I get down to the set down in San Diego where we're shooting in the bar. Vinny Caron, who is one of the leads in their first movie, Resolution. And apparently he don't give a crap about no days or schedules because he was just riffing left and right. And all I could think was, man, I should have done what Vinny did. Vinny don't care. Vinny just bees Vinny.
Vinny don't give a shit.
Vinny don't give a shit. But yeah, no, it's such a blast, man. I can't wait to work with those guys again. They're really, really good friends.
So I want to make sure that you guys, what is the website to go to for Tex Montana? How can people get in touch with you guys? What's the best way to find out more and all that great stuff?
You can go to texmontana.com. That'll take you right to our campaign page. We are about 9 days away from this thing being over, which means if we succeed, you're only about 15 to 17 days away from actually seeing this thing because we're just going to release it. It's done. texmontana.com. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Jeremy Gardner.
And I'm at Christian Stella.
I'm only Mr. because every other permutation of Jeremy Gardner was taken, so it's not like I'm calling myself Mr., but there was just no way to do that. And then you can find us on Facebook at Tex Montana or The Battery on Facebook. But texmontana.com or Twitter. We're really active on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, people can just ask me stupid camera questions. I'll answer. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's no question too stupid. I'll just call it stupid on a podcast one day.
Yeah, well, that's what we've always been. I always used to say, whatever you think of Kevin Smith's films, the fact that he makes himself available to so many people and is so open about the process was something we wanted to ape. And we try to do that. We try not to ever let an email about a question about filmmaking go unanswered. So, whatever you got, throw it at us.
Awesome, guys. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing the film. How are you going to release it when it comes out? Are you just going to put it? Do you assume that things will just kind of explode on their own, or are you going to put it somewhere specific, like iTunes?
Yeah, we're basically if we hit the goal, 2 weeks after the campaign ends, we're going to release it on YouTube and Vimeo. And the Vimeo version will have the download button unlocked, so you'll be able to download it 1080p from Vimeo. And then there's going to be torrents in all kinds of shapes and sizes and of DVDs and Blu-rays with artwork. And then, texmontana.com at that point will just be kind of a repository of all the different ways you can get it. And at that point, then people can post it anywhere else if there's places that we don't know. The only places we're not going to be doing are places like iTunes, etc., because then we'd have to charge for the movie, and that's the whole point, is that after this campaign, we're not going to charge for it ever again. So that's it. I mean, if they'd be willing to put it up for free, I'd put it on iTunes.
And if we don't hit our goal, we're going to take the hard drive with the movie, and we're going to film ourselves smashing it with a hammer. No one will ever see it.
Well, guys, I really appreciate it. Is there anything else? Are we good?
No, that's it. texmontana.com. Thank you so much for the forum.
Thank you, guys.
It's a really fun chat.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. I want to thank my guests, Christian Stella and Jeremy Gardner. I really appreciate them giving us almost 2 hours of their time. And I want to encourage everybody that if you have questions about filmmaking or you want us to cover something on the show, feel free to follow us on Facebook and go to our Indie Film Academy group, or you can contact me on Twitter, or you can just write me an email at hello@indiefilmacademy.com, and we will try to make sure we're covering the things that you guys want to know. All right, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Academy podcast. Don't forget to join our newsletter for more tips and tricks on how to make and